I'm starting a series called The Web of Gaming. Most of the modern game industry can be traced back here to 1991. Let's do this. These are my sources. So, it starts here with a split. In 1991, Brian Fargo and Interplay decide to break away from their longtime distributor, Electronic Arts. Fargo had been operating under the safety of a company that gave him access to stores and audience, but he wanted independence, creative freedom, and control over his own destiny. For our protagonist, it was risky. Every choice from now on would carry weight, and the first domino had been pushed. Meanwhile, across the industry, a struggling company called Mediagenic is barely holding on. Its history is long, its reputation is tarnished, and its finances are in shambles. Few would have guessed that it would play a pivotal role in the future of gaming. Then a young and ambitious businessman, Bobby Kotick, rounds up some investors to buy the scraps of Mediagenic for $400,000, pennies on the dollar. He quietly rebrands it and begins laying the groundwork for what would eventually become a major force in the video game world. That company, though nobody may have realized it at a time, would soon be known again as the Phoenix of Activision. Back in California, three UCLA graduates would start a tiny development studio called Silicon and Synapse. They are talented, ambitious, and full of potential, but at this point, they're just a small team working on modest projects. Brian Fargo and Interplay notices their skills and contracts them, even giving them a small stake just to keep their attention. Or, well, Fargo getting the 10% stake in the company. Right now, they're just Silicon and Synapse, a scrappy startup in a dorm room with no idea that they would one day change the landscape of PC gaming forever. Fargo, meanwhile, faces another challenge. He wants Silicon and Synapse to develop for the Super Nintendo, but Nintendo, more importantly, cartridge economics, demands massive upfront payments for cartridges and licensing. Millions are tied up in plastic before a single sale hits the shelves. To counteract this, Interplay and many other companies at the time had to take on massive amounts of debt. Creative freedom has come at a steep cost, and every day is a balancing act between ambition and survival. By 1994, Interplay seeks additional capital, debt relief, essentially, to continue making games. Well, they sell 45% of the company to MCA Universal. This cash keeps the company afloat, but control is slipping. Investors have a say on the future of Fargo's company. One critical decision is whether to acquire Silicon and Synapse outright. Fargo sees the brilliance of the team. He knows that their talent could define the next era of gaming. But the investors say no. They don't have the vision, the potential, or the long-term value. And at this moment, the stage is set for a true twist in the story. Davidson and Associates, an edutainment company known for games like Math Blaster, steps in and buys the studio. Suddenly, Silicon and Synapse is no longer just a scrappy startup. It changes its name from Silicon and Synapse to Chaos Studios. But Chaos Studios was very copywritten, and they didn't want to pay $100,000 to change the name. But Davidson and Associates also wanted them to keep their name sensible for their family-friendly brand. So they eventually changed their name to the studio that we now know as Blizzard Entertainment. Blizzard Entertainment, in the same year, only 8 months after the deal between Silicon and Synapse and Interplay is passed, would then go on to revolutionize the genre of RTS by releasing Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. Becomes a massive hit. The success attracts the attention of corporate giant CUC International, which purchases both Blizzard and Sierra Online for $1.8 billion. In December of 1997, CUC merges with HFS to form Sendent, a sprawling conglomerate that seems unstoppable. But appearances and, I guess, magic money will be deceiving. Auditors soon uncover a massive fraud. CUC had inflated profits by hundreds of millions of dollars. When the truth hits the market, $14 billion in value evaporates overnight. Panic spreads. Assets are now toxic. Said assets, including Blizzard, the entire CUC software division, is sold to Havas for $800 million. Shortly thereafter, Vivendi acquires Havas, placing Blizzard under the control of a former French water company and at the time a French media giant. The creators are still at the helm, but the destiny of their studio is no longer entirely theirs. Meanwhile, Interplay is struggling under mounting financial pressures. In 1998, they go public, an IPO, to raise capital on the Nasdaq. But public ownership comes with strings attached. By 2001, French publisher Titus Interactive, known for wonderful games such as Superman 64, has acquired a majority stake, taking control of the board and executive decisions. Brian Fargo, who had struck out on his own over a decade earlier, finds himself powerless to influence the company that he founded. In 2002, he resigns. The founder is out, and Interplay's independence is gone. The collapse of Interplay also signals the end of an era for independent role-playing games. Black Isle Studios, creators of Fallout and other classics, are shuttered. Key members leave even before the studio was closed to form Obsidian Entertainment. Interplay sells the Fallout intellectual property to Bethesda for $5.75 million. Creative power has shifted away from the original innovators. Finally, the dominoes have fallen completely. Vivendi Games, now holding Blizzard, merges with Bobby Kotick's Activision, which has grown into a corporate giant, to form Activision Blizzard. But Vivendi tries to loot Blizzard reserves to pay their mounting debts from 2008 to 2010, if I remember correctly. But on October 11th, 2013, Activision plus the Bobby Kotick-led investor group buys out Activision Blizzard for $8 billion. And of course, it eventually turns into Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard and King for $65.7 billion. It is an absurd domino effect, you know? Fargo split from EA, the quiet revival of Mediagenic, Silicon and Synapse's journey from a dorm room startup to Blizzard. The investors know it's all connected. The 1991 domino effect that affects all of gaming ripples across decades, tying together independence, ambition, failure, genius, and corporate power into a sprawling web that reshapes the gaming world forever. This is the end of my first episode. I'm gonna try to do this more often, more long videos with more content in them. And, like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, now, peace.